Last night's episode of Jimmy Kimmel Live took a dramatic turn when superstar Jennifer Lopez stormed off the stage after a fiery confrontation with host Jimmy Kimmel about toxic media and unfairness in the entertainment industry. The studio atmosphere was already tense when Lopez, a Latin icon with a dazzling career, stepped out to promote her new album. At 55, the Bronx-born star, renowned for her hits and powerful roles, exuded resolute confidence, but her sharp gaze hinted at an impending explosion. Jimmy Kimmel, with his usual mischievous smile, welcomed her amid enthusiastic applause from the audience, but the edge in his tone soon sparked tension. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. The studio air grew thick, the stage lights seemingly brighter, shining directly on Jennifer Lopez, who sat upright, her eyes glinting with determination. Jimmy Kimmel, still sporting his smug half-smile, leaned forward. His voice was soft, laced with familiar sarcasm, the kind of tone from someone who knows they're lighting a fuse. J-Lo, you're an icon, that's undeniable, but with all that glamour, do you ever feel pressure from what people say online? I mean, social media's basically a public courtroom now, right? Lopez took a deep breath, her hands resting lightly on her thighs, but her fingers tapped subtly, a sign of restraint. She looked straight at Kimmel, her voice low but clear. Jimmy, social media's a double-edged sword. It lets me connect with fans, but it's also where people twist everything I do. I don't live to please the online crowd. The audience clapped lightly, but the applause was sparse, as if they were bracing for something bigger. Kimmel raised an eyebrow, his smile sharpening, like a predator sensing an opportunity. Come on, J-Lo, you can't deny that sometimes those criticisms have a point. You're a huge influencer. Every move, every word gets scrutinized. Isn't that just part of the game of being a star? He paused, glancing at the audience, as if inviting their agreement. A few chuckles echoed, but Lopez didn't smile. Her lips pressed tight, her gaze piercing Kimmel, as if gauging how far he'd push. The game, Lopez shot back, her voice sharp yet outwardly calm. Jimmy, I don't call being judged for every personal decision or role a game. I call it unfairness. When I work, I pour in sweat and tears, from dancing on In Living Color to standing on the Super Bowl stage. But the media and social media only want to talk about what I wear, who I date, or how I dance. She paused, letting her words sink into the audience, some of whom nodded, feeling the weight in her voice. Kimmel, unfazed, pressed deeper. But J-Lo, you've got to admit, sometimes those controversies aren't baseless. For instance, lately, people have been talking about stuff involving you and, well, some old friends. What do you think about the public demanding transparency from stars like you? He trailed off deliberately, but everyone knew he was alluding to rumors about Sean Diddy Combs' lawsuit, a shadow from Lopez's past. The studio froze. A few audience members whispered, sensing a line had been crossed. Lopez tilted her head, her eyes no longer just defensive but blazing like fire. Jimmy, what are you doing, digging up the past for views? She gave a faint smile, but it held no warmth. I'm not here to answer disrespectful questions about things you know are blown out of proportion. I'm here to talk about my music, my work, what I've built over years. But you and people like you just want to drag me down for a clickbait headline. Kimmel flinched but quickly regained his composure. J-Lo, I didn't mean to offend. I'm just saying, in this era, celebrities have to take responsibility for their actions, right? Cancel culture, whether you agree or not, it's how the public demands transparency. He shrugged, as if trying to diffuse things, but his eyes betrayed a challenge. Lopez shook her head, her curls swaying gently, but her voice was steel. Transparency? You call turning someone's private life into a punchline on live TV transparency? I've been in the spotlight since I was a girl from the Bronx, Jimmy. I know pressure, but I also know when people twist the truth for profit. You're doing that right now. She pointed lightly at Kimmel, not aggressive but commanding, making the audience hold their breath. A producer in the control room whispered through the earpiece, "Careful, Jimmy, she's not playing." But Kimmel, with the instincts of a seasoned host, pressed on. I get you, J-Lo. But don't you think sometimes the public has a right to ask questions, like your divorce from Ben Affleck? People are curious, and it affects your image. His words poured fuel on the fire, and the audience sensed danger in the air. Lopez sat up straighter, arms crossed, her gaze burning. "You want to talk about my personal life? Fine, but let's talk about why you never ask male stars questions like that. Why am I, a Latin woman, always called out for what I do off stage while others get praised for their work?" She paused, her voice lowering but brimming with power. "You think this is a joke, but to me it's my life. My sleepless nights, the times I've had to pick myself up after the media trampled me." The audience was now completely silent, only the hum of cameras audible. A few exchanged glances, sensing they were witnessing an unforgettable moment. Kimmel, for the first time, looked off balance, his smile strained. "J-Lo, I'm just trying to have an honest conversation," he began, but Lopez cut him off, her voice sharp as a blade. "Honest? No, Jimmy, you're trying to make me a punchline, but I'm not here to be fodder for your jokes." The audience, once eager for the initial banter, now sat frozen, feeling the fire in her voice. Lopez took a deep breath, her eyes locked on Kimmel, as if daring him to continue. "You want to talk about accountability, Jimmy?" she began, her voice low but razor sharp. "Then let's talk about the accountability of people like you, who hold the mic and turn others' lives into entertainment. You think that's justice, or just a way to chase a few more ratings?" She leaned forward, not aggressive, but each word like a precisely aimed bullet. Kimmel, used to controlling the show's rhythm, tried to regain the upper hand. He shrugged, his tone still carrying that trademark humor, but now slightly forced. "J-Lo, you're getting a bit intense there. I'm just asking questions, like I do with every guest. The public wants the truth, and I'm just the messenger. Didn't you say you're a straight talker yourself?" He looked to the audience, hoping for laughter to break the tension, but received only a few scattered claps. Lopez shook her head, her curls swaying gently, but her gaze didn't waver. "Don't dodge, Jimmy. You're not asking for the truth. You're asking to stir up drama, to give people online something to talk about. I've lived through enough sensational headlines to know how this game works." She paused, letting her words sink in, then continued with a calm but powerful voice. "When I did Hustlers, people didn't talk about my acting. They talked about what I wore, how I danced. When I performed at the Super Bowl, they didn't praise the performance. They criticized me for being too Latin or too sexy. That's not accountability, it's prejudice." The audience began to murmur, some nodding, feeling the sincerity in Lopez's words. A few women in the crowd clapped softly, as if finding resonance in her story. But Kimmel, not wanting to lose control, decided to push further. "I get it, J-Lo, really. But don't you think, as someone with influence, you need to be more careful? I mean, what you do, what you say, impacts millions, especially young women, and the Latin community." He tried to sound empathetic, but his tone carried a hint of implication, as if suggesting Lopez hadn't lived up to her role. Kimmel's words were like a spark igniting a fuse. Lopez sat up straighter, her hands relaxed but her gaze burning. "Careful. By whose standards, Jimmy? Yours? The people behind keyboards judging me for being myself? Or the Hollywood producers who once told me I wasn't American enough for a lead role?" She paused, locking eyes with Kimmel, her voice now a razor-sharp blade. "I fought to get here, not by bowing to the standards others set, but by being myself, a Latin woman from the Bronx, daring to dream big and keep pushing forward." A thunderous wave of applause erupted from the audience, louder than any laugh Kimmel had gotten that night. But Kimmel, unwilling to be overshadowed, tried to regain control. "J-Lo, I'm not saying you don't deserve it. You're an icon, everyone knows that. But when you're at the top, people notice every step you take. Like the recent controversies about your personal life. People want to know if you're on the right side." He emphasized the point, clearly alluding to the Affleck divorce and Diddy-related rumors. Lopez furrowed her brow, her eyes now not just angry but like a volcano ready to erupt. "The right side?" she repeated, her voice low but commanding. "You're trying to make me the villain in a story you don't even understand. You think you have the right to judge me, my life, just because you have a TV show? I've lived through long nights of being smeared by the press, called a diva, criticized for loving, for living, for being myself. And you just sit here tossing out questions for views, then go home and sleep soundly." The studio air felt drained of oxygen. Some audience members sat with mouths agape, feeling the weight of Lopez's words. In the control room, a producer whispered through the earpiece, "Cut to commercial, this is going too far." But the director shook his head, knowing this moment was too significant to stop. Kimmel, for the first time that night, looked genuinely rattled. He opened his mouth, but his tone had lost its confidence. "J-Lo, I'm not trying to make you the villain. I'm just doing my job, asking the questions the audience wants to hear." Lopez gave a bitter smirk, devoid of joy. Your job is turning real people into entertainment, Jimmy. You don't ask questions to understand, you ask to spark controversy. You and people like you have turned the media into a shredding machine, and I'm not here to be its victim." She pointed toward the audience, her voice ringing like a rallying cry. "People deserve to hear real stories, not versions chopped up to fit your headlines." Kimmel cleared his throat, trying to regain control, but his usual smoothness was gone. "J-Lo, I respect you, really," he began, his tone conciliatory yet still laced with a hint of challenge. "But you've got to admit, being famous means living under a microscope. People care about you, about your choices, like your recent personal life decisions. They want to understand why." He paused, his eyes flicking to the audience as if seeking support, but met only stifling silence. Lopez tilted her head, her curls swaying gently, but her gaze was like a spear aimed at Kimmel. "My personal decisions?" she asked, her voice lowering, as if holding back a tidal wave. "What are you trying to say, Jimmy? That I owe the world an explanation for how I live my life? That I need the public's permission before I love, break up, or rise from pain?" She paused, letting the question hang, making the studio air feel heavier. The audience murmured, some nodding, sensing the truth in Lopez's words. But Kimmel, unwilling to let her take the upper hand, dug deeper. "I'm not saying you need permission, J-Lo," he replied, his voice now tinged with defensiveness. "But you're a role model, especially for women in the Latin community. When you make choices like, well, ending a major relationship, people will ask questions. That's not prejudice, it's natural curiosity." He forced a smile, but it only made him look more awkward. Lopez let out a dry laugh, humorless, sending a chill through the studio. "Natural curiosity," she echoed, her voice now a razor-sharp slash. "No, Jimmy, that's not curiosity. That's invasion. You think I don't know what people say about me? That I'm too much of a lover, unstable, too ambitious, just for daring to be myself? But have you ever asked the men in this industry those same questions? Or is it just me, a Latin woman, who has to stand here justifying my life?" Her words hit like a punch, leaving Kimmel stunned. He opened his mouth but couldn't find an immediate retort, a rare moment for a seasoned host like him. The audience began clapping, a scattered applause that grew louder, as if swept up in Lopez's emotional storm. In the control room, a producer whispered through the earpiece, "This is getting out of hand. Should we cut to commercial?" But the director signaled to keep rolling, knowing this moment was television gold. Kimmel, feeling the pressure from the audience and production team, tried to pivot. "J-Lo, I'm not targeting you because you're a Latin woman," he said, his voice now slightly rushed. "I'm just doing my job, bringing the conversations the audience wants to hear. Don't you think with your influence, you have a responsibility to explain a little? Especially when your choices affect your public image?" He leaned forward, as if trying to reclaim control, but his eyes betrayed unease. Lopez shook her head, her eyes now not just angry but carrying a deep disappointment. "My responsibility is to live true to myself and work hard," she replied, her voice slow but commanding. "I don't owe anyone an explanation for who I love, who I leave, or how I rise from pain. But you, Jimmy, you're responsible for what you say on air. Don't you see? Questions like these aren't conversation. They're a way to make me entertainment, so you and your audience can feel superior, judging me from a safe perch." Her words crashed like a wave, sweeping away Kimmel's attempts to stay neutral. The audience didn't just clap now, they cheered, some standing, moved by her strength. Kimmel, for the first time that night, looked defeated. He forced a strained smile, but his eyes betrayed panic. "Lo, you're misunderstanding me," he said, his voice now slightly shaky. "I just wanted an open dialogue. I'm not trying to upset you." Lopez looked at him, her gaze piercing through Kimmel's every facade. "Open?" she asked, her voice now a whisper but brimming with power. "No, Jimmy, you don't want dialogue. You want me to bow, to apologize for being myself, but I won't do that. I've come too far, fought too hard to stand here and let you or anyone else judge me." She paused, turning to the audience, her voice ringing like a proclamation. "I'm not here to please everyone, but I'll always stand up for what I believe is right." The studio felt like a blazing arena, the air so thick every eye was drawn to Jennifer Lopez. She stood there, shoulders back, eyes blazing like an unquenchable fire, having just declared her fierce self-respect. The audience, from stunned silence, was now swept into an emotional whirlwind, their applause thundering, mixed with shouts of support. Jimmy Kimmel, once the sharp-witted stage master, now looked like a boxer backed into a corner, his hand gripping the pen, his forced smile unable to hide his unease. Kimmel took a deep breath, trying to regain his composure, but his usual smoothness was gone. "J-Lo, you're blowing this out of proportion," he said, attempting a light tone but failing to mask the tension. "I'm not trying to make you a punchline. I'm just saying, as a major star, you face public pressure. Like the recent divorce stuff, people want to know where you stand in all that mess." He paused, hoping his words would sway the audience, but his eyes showed worry as they met Lopez's. His words were like a stone tossed into a hornet's nest. Lopez stood abruptly, her glittering dress catching the stage lights, but her eyes were a storm. "What did you just say, Jimmy?" she asked, her voice low and sharp like a blade slicing the air. "You think you have the right to drag my personal life out to dissect on live TV, just so your audience has something to gossip about? You think that's your job, or just a way to make yourself feel more important?" She took a step toward Kimmel's desk, not aggressive, but every movement radiating undeniable authority. The audience fell silent, only the hum of cameras and the hurried breaths of the production team in the control room audible. A few people discreetly raised their phones, ignoring the warning glares from security. Kimmel, realizing he'd crossed a dangerous line, tried to diffuse the tension. "J-Lo, I didn't mean it like that," he said, raising both hands as if to wave away the strain. "I'm just trying to have an honest conversation. You're a strong woman, everyone sees that. But don't you think the audience deserves to hear a bit about how you face those challenges?" Lopez shook her head, her lips pressed tight, her gaze now scorching the stage. "Honest?" she countered, her voice like an accusation. "No, Jimmy, you don't want honesty. You want me to sit here, smile and answer your invasive questions so you can turn me into a new headline. But I'm not your puppet, and I'm not here to entertain people who just want to see me fall." She turned to the audience, her voice rising like a rallying cry, powerful and emotional. "Everyone, I'm not afraid of scrutiny. I've lived under the spotlight my whole life, but I won't let anyone, including you, Jimmy, define me with lies or twisted stories." A thunderous wave of applause erupted, so strong it seemed to shake the studio. Some audience members stood, cheering, moved by Lopez's resilience. In the control room, the director signaled the camera crew to zoom in on her face, knowing this moment would become legendary. But Kimmel, now completely out of control, tried to interject. "J-Lo, you're misreading me," he said, his voice tinged with desperation. "I'm not trying to define you, I'm just doing my job, giving the audience what they want." Lopez turned back, her gaze like an arrow aimed straight at him. "Your job?" she asked, her voice now a forceful whisper. "Your job is to sit behind that desk, throw toxic questions at people, and pretend it's entertainment. You know nothing about the battles I've fought. Not just to succeed, but to be respected as a person, as a woman, as a Latina. You don't know what it's like to be judged by the world just for daring to be yourself." She paused, her eyes sweeping over the audience, as if speaking to each one. "But I do, and I won't let you or anyone make me feel like I'm not enough." The audience erupted again, applause crashing like waves, some shouting J-Lo in excitement. Kimmel, now looking like a man trapped in a storm, made one last attempt to salvage the situation. "J-Lo, I respect you, really," he said, his voice almost pleading. "Can we get back to talking about your album? That's why you're here, right?" But Lopez was too far gone to turn back. She stepped away from her chair, her high heels clicking on the stage floor, each step a declaration. "No, Jimmy," she said, her voice calm but commanding. "I don't need your stage to talk about my album. I don't need you or your show to prove who I am. I've done that my whole life, and I'll keep doing it, with or without you." She turned to the audience one last time, her eyes blazing like fire. "Thank you for supporting me, but I'm not here to be made a joke. Respect those who stand up for themselves." With those words, Lopez turned and strode decisively toward the wings, leaving the studio in stunned silence. The sound of her heels echoed like drum beats, each step a hammer blow to Kimmel's confidence. The audience erupted in a final wave of applause, some standing and cheering as if witnessing a triumph. Kimmel took a deep breath, forcing a crooked smile, his eyes scanning the audience for rescue. "Well, folks, looks like J-Lo just gave us a top-notch performance, huh?" he said, his voice faltering, trying to inject his usual humor. But the audience didn't respond. A few scattered laughs rang out but quickly drowned in the heavy atmosphere. A woman in the front row shook her head, whispering to her friend, "She just schooled him." Phones remained raised, despite the security team's sharp glares, covertly capturing this historic moment. In the control room, chaos reigned even more than on stage. Producers leapt to their feet, voices overlapping through headsets. "Cut the feed. Go to commercial now," one shouted, slamming a hand on the desk. But the director, tense yet thrilled, raised a hand for calm. "No, keep it rolling. This is gold, we can't miss it." A young technician, eyes glued to the monitor, whispered, "She just stunned the world." Close-up footage of Lopez exiting the stage still played on the screens, like a film that couldn't be paused. On stage, Kimmel tried to carry on, but his voice was like a car with a flat tire, limping through each word. We'll move on to our next guest after a short break, folks," he said, his gaze avoiding the audience. But the audience no longer paid him attention. They turned to each other, buzzing with discussion, some covertly texting or posting on social media. "J-Lo just taught Kimmel a lesson." A status update appeared online, paired with a brief clip of Lopez's exit. Within minutes, the hashtag #JLovasKimmel began trending. Backstage, the tension was no less palpable. Another guest, a young male singer waiting for his turn, stood in the wings, jaw dropped as he witnessed the ordeal. "She's fearless," he whispered to his assistant, eyes full of admiration. A stagehand, holding a water bottle, shook her head and said to a colleague, "I've never seen Kimmel backed into a corner like that." He met his match. Meanwhile, security moved swiftly through the aisles, trying to confiscate phones from audience members still recording, but their efforts were nearly futile. The clips had already begun to spread, like wildfire across dry fields. In the dressing room, Lopez, now off stage, sat before a mirror, her gaze still resolute, though her hands trembled slightly as she held a glass of water. Her manager, a middle-aged woman with a worried expression, entered. "Jen, you okay? It's gonna be huge," she said, voice laced with concern. Lopez stared into the mirror, her lips pressed into a firm line. "I'm fine," she replied, her voice low but steady. "I don't regret it. He needed to hear what I said, and the world needed to hear it too." She stood, smoothing her dress, as if gearing up for a new battle. Back in the studio, Kimmel, now seated behind his desk, tried to regain his composure. He flipped through his script, but his eyes were distant, as if searching for himself. The production team, via headset, urged him to keep the show moving, but his voice still quavered as he introduced the commercial break. "We'll be right back, folks," he said, but no one believed the show could return to normal after that moment. A lighting technician near the stage whispered to a coworker, "He just dug his own grave. J-Lo's not someone to mess with." The audience began leaving their seats, some still buzzing with discussion, while others hurriedly checked their phones, searching for posts about the incident. A young woman clutching her phone shouted to her friend, "This clip's already got thousands of views." Social media posts exploded. "J-Lo is a queen. Kimmel didn't stand a chance," mixed with, "She overreacted. It's just a talk show." The polarization had begun, and the incident clearly wouldn't stay confined to the studio's four walls. In the control room, producers started grasping the fallout of the moment. One, holding a phone and scrolling through posts, muttered, "We're getting called into an emergency meeting for this." Another, eyeing the live metrics on a screen, said with concern, "Viewership spiking, but the online comments, not good for Jimmy." The director, still calm, nodded. "Let it spread. This is what TV lives for." The studio grew more chaotic as the audience began to disperse, carrying stories and videos that would shake social media. Kimmel, sitting alone behind his desk, stared at the empty spot where Lopez had stood, his eyes like those of someone who just lost a major chess match. The cameras kept rolling, capturing the rare moment when a host was completely outshone. Just minutes after Lopez left the stage, audience-recorded clips flooded social media, like bullets from an uncontrollable gun. The hashtag #JLovesKimmel shot to the top of global trends, racking up millions of views, comments, and shares. Each clip, even if just a few seconds, captured Lopez standing tall, eyes resolute, voice sharp, confronting Jimmy Kimmel, a powerful image like an icon. Online, the internet split into two clear camps. One side hailed Lopez as an unyielding queen. J-Lo just schooled Kimmel on respect. The Latina queen doesn't let anyone bully her, one user wrote, paired with a video of Lopez exiting the stage. The post quickly garnered thousands of likes and shares, with comments like, "She spoke for us," "Enough with toxic media," and the ultimate display of self-respect. Longtime Lopez fans, especially the Latin community, turned the incident into a rallying cry, sharing stories of how she inspired them to overcome prejudice. But not everyone sided with Lopez. The other camp, including some of Kimmel's loyal viewers, and those who thought she overreacted, didn't hold back criticism. J-Lo went too far. "It's just a talk show. Why storm off like that?" one account wrote, with a side-eye emoji. Another was harsher. "Who does she think she is, lecturing Kimmel? Just drama to promote her new album." These comments sparked online debates, with both sides clashing in emotional exchanges. Some even dug up Lopez's past, from relationships to old controversies, to undermine her credibility. As social media raged, entertainment outlets jumped in. TMZ posted with the headline, "J-Lo explodes, storms off Kimmel's stage after fiery clash," alongside a second-by-second breakdown of the incident. Variety, more serious, wrote, "Jennifer Lopez shocks by walking off Jimmy Kimmel Live, amid media controversy." People focused on the emotional angle, portraying Lopez as a strong woman facing relentless public pressure. Despite their different perspectives, all outlets agreed this moment would go down in TV history, an indelible milestone. Amid the media storm, Lopez broke her silence with an Instagram post the next morning. In a short video, she appeared in casual attire, hair tied high, her eyes still fiery but tinged with reflection. "Thank you all for the love and support," she said, her voice warm yet steady. "Last night I didn't go on Jimmy Kimmel Live to stir controversy. I went to talk about my music, my passion, but I couldn't stay silent when I was turned into entertainment. I stood up for myself, for women, for those distorted by the media. We deserve respect." The post quickly racked up millions of likes, with comments like, "Jen, you're an inspiration, and never apologize for being you." Lopez's post poured fuel on the fire, intensifying online debates. Some celebrities weighed in. Cardi B, another Latina, posted a brief statement, "J-Lo's right, the media always targets us, especially women of color. Enough." Meanwhile, a prominent comedian, Kimmel's colleague, defended him. "Jimmy was just doing his job. J-Lo overreacted." These opposing views amplified the incident's heat, making it a hot topic across online forums. For Kimmel, he tried to salvage the situation on the next episode. With a forced smile, he opened the show with a quip. "Well, last night was lively, huh, folks?" But the studio audience responded with only polite chuckles. Kimmel continued, attempting to explain, "I've always respected J-Lo, and I just wanted an honest conversation. Maybe we misunderstood each other." His explanation failed to calm the public. Many criticized his lack of sincerity. Kimmel's apology sounds like he's blaming J-Lo, and he needs to learn to respect his guests. The fallout for Kimmel's show became evident. Online ratings showed a significant drop in viewership, with many declaring a boycott, believing he'd gone too far. Some sponsors began raising concerns about the show's image post-incident. Internally, the production team was in crisis, holding emergency meetings to address the situation. A veteran producer, in a closed meeting, admitted, "We underestimated J.Lo. She's not just a star, she's an icon, and she knows how to fight." Meanwhile, Lopez stayed focused on her work. She appeared at an event to promote her new album, eyes radiant and smile confident, as if the Kimmel incident was a mere breeze. But those close to her knew she was still under pressure. A source close to her told People, "Jen doesn't regret speaking the truth, but she's tired of constantly defending herself." Still, she remained steadfast, posting, "Thank you to those who stand by me. Keep dreaming big and living true." The media storm following the Jennifer Lopez and Jimmy Kimmel confrontation didn't stop at social media posts or sensational headlines. It became a smoldering flame, igniting debates about the role of the media, the power of celebrities, and the invisible pressures on women, especially women of color, in entertainment. The incident, though just a few minutes on the Jimmy Kimmel Live stage, etched itself into the public's mind as a defining moment, where a star stood up not just for herself, but for greater values. Jennifer Lopez, after leaving the studio, didn't let herself be consumed by the controversy. She appeared at an album launch event in Los Angeles, dressed vibrantly, her smile radiant as if unshaken. But those close to her knew that behind the glamour was a woman all too familiar with rising after blows. In a brief interview with a music magazine, Lopez spoke, her voice low but full of life. "I'm not here to please everyone. I'm here to work to inspire, and to remind people that no one defines you but yourself." Those simple words planted a flag in the hearts of fans, especially those who'd ever felt marginalized. The incident turned Lopez into a symbol of resilience, particularly for women and the Latin community. Latin cultural organizations, from small community groups to major councils, began citing her story as an example of confronting prejudice. A post on an online forum read, "J.Lo didn't just fight for herself, she fought for all of us, those judged for their background, gender, or how they choose to live." But not everyone supported her. Some still argued she overreacted, that she should have maintained a friendly image instead of clashing. These harsh criticisms only strengthened Lopez's resolve. She continued promoting her album, appearing on major stages, and posting vibrant photos on Instagram, as if to say no one could hold her back. Meanwhile, Jimmy Kimmel faced heavier consequences. His show, once a favorite for millions, saw a significant drop in ratings. Posts continued to criticize him, with comments like, "Kimmel needs to learn to respect his guests," and he thought he could attack J.Lo without consequences. Internally, the production team was in crisis. Sponsors started asking questions, and some inside sources revealed Kimmel was summoned by executives to explain. In a later episode, he tried to lighten the mood by mentioning the unfortunate misunderstanding with Lopez, but his tone lacked sincerity, further disappointing viewers. In a private moment after the incident, Lopez sat in a recording studio, her eyes tinged with sadness but resolute. She recalled her early days in the Bronx, when Hollywood dreams were just a faint spark, years of being denied roles for not being American enough, criticized for her performance style, or scrutinized for loving and failing, all had forged a woman who never backed down. The clash with Kimmel, though painful, was a testament to that journey. She didn't just stand up for herself but for young people looking to her, hoping one day they too could boldly say no to unfair prejudice. Meanwhile, Kimmel faced a harsh lesson about the limits of media power. He, once proud of being a host who knew how to hit the right spots, now realized not everyone was willing to be a puppet in his game. A colleague of Kimmel's in an anonymous interview shared, "Jimmy always thought he could control every conversation, but this time he met someone who didn't play by his rules." The incident forced Kimmel and his team to rethink how they treated guests, especially those with complex and sensitive stories. As the spotlight on the incident began to fade, Lopez pressed on with her journey, new plans, and an unyielding spirit. She posted a brief but powerful message, "Live true, love true, and never let anyone silence you. Those words, like a small flame, continued to inspire, while Kimmel, on the other side, had to navigate a challenging new path. The incident, though over on the stage, left ripples, reshaping how the public viewed media, power, and self-respect. The story of the confrontation between Jennifer Lopez and Jimmy Kimmel on Jimmy Kimmel Live reflects deep tensions in contemporary American society, particularly regarding how media and social media shape public perception. In the narrative, Lopez stood up against Kimmel's invasive questions, from probing her personal life like her divorce from Ben Affleck, to alluding to rumors involving Sean Diddy Combs, highlighting the unfair scrutiny women, especially women of color, face from the media. This clash, along with the polarized reactions on social media from praising Lopez as a Latina queen to criticizing her for overreacting, mirrors the reality of American society, where issues of race, gender, and media power frequently spark controversy. Kimmel's attempt to justify his actions as just doing his job, but ultimately suffering a ratings hit, demonstrates the power of public opinion in holding influential figures accountable. The lesson is that in real life in the United States, where social media and the press can easily distort or amplify personal stories, everyone must learn to stand up for their values, as Lopez did by refusing to be entertainment. Confidently say no when feeling violated, but do so with respect and reason, as Lopez urged the audience to think independently. Simultaneously, Kimmel's ordeal reminds us to be cautious with words and actions, especially in positions of influence, as a single misstep can cause lasting damage to credibility. Finally, foster empathy and avoid snap judgments, because as Lopez pointed out, everyone has private battles the media never fully reveals. Thank you for following J-Lo's emotional journey. Hit subscribe to not miss the next epic story, and see you in the upcoming video.